Welcome to the Cast Distillery podcast, where we unlock the full potential of ServiceNow with expert insights and practical strategies only here on the Cast Distillery podcast. I'm your host, Sean Dawson. I'm a client architect here at Cast, and we're going to be talking today about getting back to out of box. You know, so many platforms out there can be over customized and core functionality has been broken. You can't upgrade. You can't use new features and functionality. And I have with me today a very special guest, Christine Morris. And Christine has 20 years of experience as an IT leader for Fortune 500 organizations across a broad range of industry segments. And in addition, she's been a platform owner for a global manufacturer. And I get to call her a coworker. We work a lot together. So welcome, Christine. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I want to start out kind of high level, you know, like what is replatforming at a high level? Like what is it all about? And we're going to dive deep into it, but what is it at a high level so people understand what we're talking about?
Well, you know, the ServiceNow platform has been out for many, many years. And early on in you know, the platform days, it was you can do anything with ServiceNow, and you were encouraged to customize. And so, you know, what's really happened at this point is that people took that advice and they customized, and they built custom tables, and they built custom scope types, and they built, you know, tons and tons of custom pieces of software. And then ServiceNow kind of took a turn and really started iterating on future releases, growing the platform out to expand way past just the fundamental ITSM ticketing system into, you know, really, you know, kind of an ERP. And, you know, for clients that had been on since those days of customization craziness, they couldn't even take advantage of those features. So I myself was a platform owner. You know, we had, I think, every module under the sun, and we had customized. And, you know, every time a new release would come out, you'd get excited, you'd go look, and you'd realize I can't use this. So, you know, what ends up happening is you have to make a decision at some point to say, is it time to try and go to a green field? So there's kind of a couple different ways you can do it. You know, there's trying to unwind what you've customized, which is very much like a needle in a haystack kind of scenario, or starting fresh. So,
So is there like for those listeners out there and people watching this online, how do I identify who should be considering this?
Well, I guess it's really, really those early adopters, you know, folks that have been on the platform for a long time, especially, you know, pre-Aspen release days when releases didn't even have a city name. You know, it's those folks that have attempted to branch out past ITSM and introduce new features and found that it won't work. You know, it's ultimately not going to function due to those customizations.
And you had mentioned this earlier, kind of in the beginning, is ServiceNow features that won't be available. There's a risk to it, but what have you seen in the market for features like customers that have gotten caught and couldn't do things? Any examples of so people could like, oh yeah, that's me. Anything, you know, as an example that you can share that you've seen with features that aren't available and how it impacts people?
Yeah, I mean, I think from you know, customizations of the service catalog is a huge one. You know, people have, you know, I think there are a lot of partners out there that have these pre-built customization catalog accelerators. And, you know, a lot of times what we're seeing is, you know, people can't even use the fundamentals of the system anymore. So, you know, catalog is one that's, you know, really grown and is really fundamental for the platform. I think, you know, the workspaces. So some people have just customized their views and customized their forms to such a degree that they attempt to start using the wonderful new workspaces, and they can't even use those.
Is there anything organizations should consider when they're replatforming, like kind of boxing it in? Like what are the things that they should be worried about, thinking about when considering replatforming?
Well, so it really has to start with, a comprehensive assessment of your current instance, so that you can really make that
Mm-hmm.
decision as to whether it's, is it time to replatform, or can I undo some of these customizations? You have to look at the dictionaries of the various tables. You have to look at the integrations, the dependencies across the various modules, and really understand what you've done from a customization standpoint, so that you can really identify those pain points and their challenges and figure out, that's, when we have to decide, okay, is this an unwind situation, or is this, let's start with a new greenfield? One of the things that we
Mm-hmm.
commonly see is that folks have to, in some instances, because the platform is wonderful, they've built amazing things that they may want to take with them. So it's evaluating,
Mm-hmm.
is this something that's continuing to give value and doesn't really have a place, a current place or home on the new platform?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you kind of alluded to it already, is with the assessment. That's kind of how an organization would figure out how bad it is. Because sometimes you don't know until you're like really analyze it. So how on the other side of this is, how do we know if you're going to start over or unwind?
So, I mean, I think it's really bringing in a partner, somebody who really understands, what the platform is doing and can evaluate those back end tables and figure out, what's there. Have we done just a couple custom integrations or a couple custom fields that can just be undone? Or is it tons and tons of information? And one of the other kind of helpful tools for that is, doing a health check with ServiceNow, where they can run their tool and really kind of see how far you are off from, a configuration versus customization perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's
And I,
evaluating the cost
okay.
is another piece of it. So,
Okay.
if you're going to unwind and it's small, then it's a cheap and easy approach. If I think what typically happens when we do these, assessments for our clients, is that it's not easy because of all the cross-platform things. So it's evaluating
Yeah.
what value, what features can you take advantage of, and really kind of figuring out what that business case is.
Yep. And that leads me to my next question, because you mentioned about financials and thinking about the cost of it. But and I know you went through this in your career, but how do you go about getting funding when you do need to go back to out of box? Like, let's say you've looked at it, you've assessed it, you're like, gosh, this is going to be, this amount of money, maybe bigger or smaller than you expected. But how would you recommend getting funding when you do need to go go back to out of the box?
So one, it's understanding, your organization's, goals and the things that they're looking to achieve. So in many instances, they're looking to enhance the employee experience. So having, line items from a planning perspective that really resonate with your leadership team is huge. I think that's a big piece of it. And then it's understanding, what parts of the platform or what features are going to take advantage of that in the end result in actual cost savings. So if it's something as simple as moving to virtual agent, and you have an outsourced service desk where every phone call is a cost and has a dollar value, so using some of those new features to kind of offset the cost of replatforming is, I think one of the things that we've seen most successful. Because in the end, if you're
Building kind of a,
go ahead.
Keep going.
No,
It's okay.
I mean,
Go
in
ahead.
the end, if you're introducing features that are ultimately, doing automations, shifting calls away from the service desk, enhancing that self-service feature, in many instances, it can pay for itself. And it's, figuring out that,
Yeah.
that model to, so that you can show.
Yeah. So it's looking forward too. It's not just what I'm hearing you say is, don't think about just fixing what you've got, but what you're gaining out of it as well. Like what are the features, and then utilizing even your ServiceNow team to figure out what the ROI is for those new features and business value, and helping justify it that way. But it's not just a cost, but it could generate revenue. Depending on the feature, that totally makes sense. So since we're talking about replatforming and we could be getting new features, But what happens to all the data and the records that we have today when we're considering this? If we're going to be doing a reboot or a Z-boot or, refactoring, what do we need to be thinking about
Well,
there?
so I think it's really important in that planning phase when you're, starting to look at replatforming is to figure out, one, what are your organization's constraints around data? Do you have to keep your change management records for 3 years? So understanding that is going to be key. But then it's, if you take old data from a customized system and try and put it into a new clean system, what often happens is you're just carrying over customizations. So, there's a couple different ways that we encourage. We encourage folks not to bring that old data because there was a reason you were getting away from it. And there's a couple different mechanisms. Of course, you can store it in a SQL database somewhere so folks still have access to it. You can also, take that ticket data, especially if you're an ITSM Pro customer of ServiceNow, you can actually import ticket data into performance analytics. So you still have your data and your analytics there, but you're not pulling in all those custom fields and muddying up your clean tables that you're trying to get to.
Yeah, understand. So the next area that I wanted to get into here with you is kind of on the preventative side. We might have listeners thinking, well, gosh, I don't want to end up here. So what would you say is the process to address over customization?
So I guess the biggest piece is really having the right governance and framework. One of the things that we see, with clients is that they give out, admin rights to everyone. You go in there, there's like 30 different administrators. When you've got that many cooks in the kitchen, the recipe it's a recipe for disaster. So it's having the right governance framework, so that you're making wise decisions. You're not customizing, and one of the things that, as we partner with our clients, it's, getting that strategy and that approach in place first so that when, because any developers love to make cool stuff, but the developers don't always think about what is the downstream impacts, what are you going to do to yourself, 3 releases down the road. So having that governance board that's really going to make decisions for the platform holistically is critical, and not handing out administrative rights to everyone. People, there's a lot more features within the platform now where you can give somebody, the ability to create a catalog item, but not necessarily, hose up your back end and put you in a situation that you can't get out of.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we mentioned customization first, but when we talk about avoiding, needing to re-platform, is kind of that customization. Re-platforming is not just about customization, but let's say they went down a road that they needed to go because you mentioned earlier, things weren't available at the time. And now all of a sudden we've got to reverse it. So we can't really avoid that. But you mentioned something when we talk about avoidance or watching out for this is governance. And within the governance framework, what are some resources, listeners can go to look up what governance is? What do they need to consider? What roles needs to be there? Like with ServiceNow, is there any area you'd recommend, our listeners go towards and get some more information on that?
I mean, ServiceNow has got a great site called their Customer Success. So it's got a lot of, kind of pre-built models, best practice information on what those roles are from a governance perspective that can really help you set that appropriate structure in place.
Okay, great. Because I think that will help. I think it really helps our listeners to know where to go. Because a lot of times we get questions after these episodes come out is like, where do we go for that stuff? So that's great. Thank you for that suggestion. So that's it for our time today. Thank you so much, Christine, for joining us. And thanks for the time.
Great to be here. Thank you, Sean.